Senator Kerry, thanks for coming today and for your testimony. I agree with candidate Barack Obama, who said in 2007 that the president doesn't have the power under the Constitution to unilaterally authorize a military attack. I'd like to know if you agree with candidate Barack Obama or if you agree with President Barack Obama, who took us to war in Libya without congressional authority unilaterally.
Well, Senator Paul, one of the things this committee has spent a lot of time on is the War Powers Act, which I support. And I believe in congressional authority to go to war. I've argued that on occasion with respect to some things here, but there are occasions which I have supported where a president of the United States has to make a decision immediately and implement that decision, execute on it immediately. I supported Ronald Reagan when he sent troops into Grenada. I supported George H.W. Bush when he sent troops into Panama. I supported President Clinton when, against the will of the Congress, he did what was needed to be done in Kosovo and Bosnia and so forth. And in this particular instance, I think the president behaved in that tradition.
I would argue, though, that the Constitution really has no exceptions for when you're having a tough time or when people disagree with you, that you just go ahead and do it. In the early 1970s, you know, after Vietnam, you were quite critical of the bombing in Cambodia because I think you felt that it wasn't authorized by Congress. Has your opinion changed about the bombing in Cambodia? How's Cambodia different than Libya?
No, nor did my opinion change, or has it ever altered, about the war in Vietnam itself, where I don't believe, and I argued then.
Is Cambodia different than Libya?
Well, Cambodia, yeah, it is, because it was an extension of the war that was being prosecuted without the involvement of Congress after a number of years. Now, that's very different.
Length of time, but similar circumstances. A bombing campaign unauthorized by Congress. See, the Constitution really doesn't give this kind of latitude to sometimes go to war and sometimes not go to war. I thought Barack Obama was very explicit, and it's what I liked about him, frankly. People think, oh, you know, Rand Paul certainly didn't like anything about Barack Obama. I did like his forthrightness when he ran for office and said, no president should unilaterally go to war. The Constitution doesn't allow it.
Well, I respect that. Look, you can be absolutist and apply it to every circumstance. The problem is it just doesn't work in some instances. When 10,000 people are about to be wiped out by a brutal dictator and you need to make a quick judgment about engagement, you certainly can't rely on a Congress that has proven itself unwilling to move after weeks and months sometimes.
Do you think a UN resolution is sufficient to go to war?
No. I think a UN resolution, when you say sufficient to go to war, I think a UN resolution is a necessary ingredient to provide the legal basis for military action in an emergency. It is not, by any means, sufficient to require the United States to do something, because we obey our Constitution and our interests and our rights. But I think
you've heard President Morsi's comments about Zionists and Israelis being bloodsuckers and descendants of apes and pigs. Do you think it's wise to send them F-16s and Abrams tanks?
I think those comments are reprehensible, and those comments set back the possibilities of working towards mutual issues of mutual interest. They are degrading comments. They're unacceptable by anybody's standard, and I think they have to appropriately be apologized for. Now,
they only understand strength, though. If you keep sending them weapons, they're not going to change their behavior.
Let me just finish. President Morsi has issued 2 statements to clarify those comments. And we had a group of senators who met with him just the other day who spent a good part of their conversation in relatively heated discussion with him about it. But not everything, you know, this is always the complication in dealings in the international sector. Not everything lends itself to a simple clarity of black, white, this, that, every time. We have critical interests with Egypt. Critical interests with Egypt. Egypt has thus far supported and lived by the peace agreement with Israel. Israel and has taken steps to begin to deal with the problem of security in the Sinai. Those are vital to us and to our national interest and to the security of Israel. In addition to that, they have followed through on the promise to have an election.
You know, but I know things are not black and white. But
let me just finish. You know, they've had an election. They've had a constitutional process. There's another election that is coming up shortly for the lower house. The fact that sometimes other countries elect somebody that you don't completely agree with doesn't give us permission to walk away from their election.
But this has been our problem with our foreign policy for decades, Republican and Democrat. We funded bin Laden. We funded the Mujahideen. We were in favor of radical jihad because they were the enemy of our enemy. We've done this so often. I see these weapons coming back to threaten Israel. I see support for Syrian rebels coming back to threaten Israel as well. I see problems with this.
As you know, Senator, in any of the arms sales that the United States has ever engaged in that part of the world, there is always a measure, a test, which is applied with respect to a qualitative difference in any of those weapons with respect to Israel's defense and security. And we do not sell weapons and will not sell weapons that might upset that qualitative balance.
Yeah, so we sell 20 F-16s to Egypt. We got to give 25 to Israel. Sounds like we're fueling an arms race. Why don't we just not give any weapons to Israel's enemies? That'd certainly save us a lot of money and might make it safer for Israel.
Better yet, until we are at that moment where that might be achievable, maybe it'd be better to try to make peace.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it. I award you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul.
One final question, if I could, Mr. Chairman. It's very short. Would you consider supporting conditioning aid to Pakistan on the release of Dr. Shakil Afridi? I'm afraid if we don't support informants who have helped us, we're not going to get many more informants.
Well, let me speak to that. First of all, I have talked directly to President Zardari, and I have talked directly to General Kayani about Dr. Afridi. And like most Americans, I find it, as you do, incomprehensible, if not repugnant, that somebody who helped to find Osama bin Laden is in jail in Pakistan. That bothers every American. That said, the Pakistanis make the argument that he didn't know what he was doing, that he didn't know who he was specifically targeting or what was happening.
You think he knew he was helping Americans, though?
Let me just finish. He clearly knew what he was doing in that because they also make the argument that he was doing that as a matter of regular course of business for him. Now, that said, that's no excuse. I'm simply explaining to you that rather than cut aid, which is a pretty dramatic, draconian, sledgehammer approach to a relationship that really has a lot of interests. You know, we have our ground line of communications, which is the military's complicated word for roads, that go to Afghanistan, and that route is critical to our supply of our troops.
The word I used, though, is condition, not cut.
We have, in addition to that, had intelligence cooperation. Our folks were able to cooperate on the ground in Pakistan. That's one of the ways we were able to get Osama bin Laden. I don't think the Pakistanis have frankly gotten credit sufficiently for the fact that they were helpful. It was their permissiveness in allowing our people to be there that helped us to be able to tie the knots that focused on that, to some degree. Not exclusively, obviously, but to some degree. In addition, they have lost some 6,000 people just in the last year in their efforts to go after terrorists. They've lost about 30,000 people over the course of the last several years because they've been willing to engage the insurgencies. And so, you know, there are things that the Pakistanis have done, as complicated as the relationship has been. Now, I think that I intend to raise the issue of Dr. Afridi with them. I can promise you that. But I am not going to recommend, nor do I think it is wise for American policy to just cut our assistance. We need to build our relationship with the Pakistanis, not diminish it.
Senator Murphy.
Thank you.
Holy underwear! We've got to protect our phony baloney job, gentlemen. We must do something about this immediately. Immediately, immediately. Harumph, 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 harumph. I didn't get a harumph out of that guy.
Give the governor harumph.
You watch your ass.